Hi, I'm back again with another special guest today because I think she's got some interesting stuff that you'll want to hear on some important topics around returning to work. I have Jann Danyluk with me, and Jann is a human resource consultant who provides HR services to a number of businesses in Southwestern Ontario. And she's also been a satisfied client of ours. Am I right, Jann?
Absolutely, Justine. I'm so delighted to be on here talking with you because I have been so impressed with you and with the things that Terry has accomplished with this business of hers and yours. And I find the team at Zavitz is just excellent, and I really enjoy working with you guys.
Oh, that's so nice. I didn't even ask you to say that, so thank you.
No, you didn't. No, that's a totally voluntary thing to say. And I think that Terry has built quite a business and started a business in a time when it wasn't that easy, well, frankly, for women to start businesses, and yet she did it, and that's pretty impressive. And look at you, you've grown in the business, and it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, she did jump through a lot of hurdles, that's for sure.
You can only imagine.
Yes. How did you decide to go the route of providing human resources services to businesses?
Well, my background is a small family business, so I know the kind of challenges that businesses have in terms of human resources issues. When I left my last job, and I've moved around a lot in jobs because that's just the way I handled my career moving along. When I left my last job, I decided that I wanted to do my own business. And the way I wanted to do that was to help small, medium, large, any business in terms of their HR issues, but in particular small and medium, because Justine, a lot of businesses might have the occasional HR problem, but they don't have an HR person to turn to. And I wanted to be that person, especially I focus on very much on business and business growth and smoothing the path for businesses. And so if I could just tell you what happened, I decided to start my own business. And so I went to a trusted advisor, Paul King at Ford Keast. And I said, what do you think of this? What do you think of the concept? And so on. And he said, you know what? It's a great concept. Why don't you do it here with us? And so I thought about that for a while because, I would have Ford Keast, which is a very well-known accounting firm, an excellent accounting firm in the area, and backing me up as an HR person. And so we sort of got together, and I've been doing that ever since. So about 4 or 5 years now with Ford Keast.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't believe it's already been 4 or 5 years.
You can't either.
Incredible. Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah.
I want to mention, because, Jan, you're right. Like for small and medium-sized businesses, it is really hard to keep your finger on the pulse. It is such an ever-evolving and ever-changing dynamic, the employer-employee relationship, and it's one that, employers want to make sure that they're not just from a sense of looking after their employees as valued members of their team, but also from the legal side of things, making sure that they are covering their butts that way as well. You have a regular human resource newsletter that you send out, and we receive it, and I read it every time I get it. It's actually what prompted me to reach out to you to do this video. And it is complimentary, right? So are you okay if I offer to have people email myself or email you to subscribe to this newsletter if they're interested in it?
That would be great. It is complimentary, and really it's a lot about helping small employers. So absolutely, I'd be delighted. It's HR Fast Facts, and I send it out to a number of people, clients, non-clients, and so on. So that would be great. And I cover topics related to HR that are in the news, or not in the news, just day-to-day HR operational issues. In Ontario, we are so highly regulated, and that has its pros and cons and makes life very challenging for businesses to keep up with what they're supposed to do, and at the same time operate their business every day and take care of their employees and so on. But we have a lot of legal regulations in Ontario that's one of the things that Fast Facts looks at on behalf of employers.
And what I love about it, the name of it is Fast Facts, and it literally is a quick read, but like packed with amazing information, but it's a quick read. So you're not sending out 3-page newsletters. It's very factual, to the point, and is addressing issues either that you've maybe come across with your own clients recently that you thought this is something great to share, or that has been happening in the news or relevant to, you know, weird situations like world pandemics and whatnot going on. So for anyone who does want to subscribe, again, you can either subscribe directly through Jann and Fast Facts, HR Fast Facts, right? Is what it's called. And or you can email myself or whoever your connection is at Zavitz Insurance and Wealth, and we'll make sure that you get put in touch with Jann to become part of that newsletter. So with everything going on right now, everything's very challenging and extremely different with the relationships with employers, employees, some of the decisions employers have had to make. We've got phase 3 going, we're reopening. I thought it'd be a great idea to have a chat with you about the return to work and topics surrounding that. What do employers need to be thinking about? What do employees need to be thinking about? And I know you've got a list of thoughts there, so I'm going to let you run with it. And if I have questions, I'm just going to pop in.
Okay. I thought I'd talk about a couple of things, and I don't want to drone on, so do feel free to hop in with questions. That would be great. I wanted to talk, of course, about pandemic preparedness, and mostly right now talking about reintegrating staff. So that was one topic. I also wanted to talk a little bit about layoffs and people who are in layoff mode. And then sort of leading out of that, work returns and refusal to return to work, which is a bit of an interesting issue that's also occurring right now. So those are sort of the things I want to touch on, and you can ask me any question anytime.
I'm sure I'll have them.
So I wanted just to begin with mentioning that things have changed, but many things haven't changed. And the core to think about from any employer point of view, there's 2 things to think about immediately. And that's having a solid offer of employment for anyone who works for us. And that's part-time, temporary, co-op, intern, casual, full-time. Any type of employment engagement must have an offer letter. And you'd be surprised that actually many places don't have an offer letter or a contract of employment, whatever you want to call it. But that is sort of the foundational thing for any employment relationship. On top of that,
if you don't have the employment contract already in place for current employees, is it easy to create a contract while someone is already an employee with you?
I wouldn't say easy, but I would say important, but it has to include some sort of consideration or money. So I do have a client who decided that they didn't have proper offer letters. And so in the offer letter, we did set up an offer letter for existing employees and paid them each a bonus amount to review it, understand it, sign it back, and receive a bonus amount. I mean, you can call it a bonus amount, but consideration is generally what it's called. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. There has been some press out there lately, and I'm not sure if this is something you were going to talk about, but that there was a recent decision in a court around the termination with and without cause, the clauses that are in the contract. And so a lot of employers have been hearing from their lawyers saying, you know, it'd be prudent of you to take a look at your contract of employment and make sure it doesn't have this language in it, and if it does, to redo them. So would that fall under the same realm of having some sort of consideration for an employee to sign a new contract that way?
Yeah. And it's complicated to ask a person who's been with you for a while to sign a new contract, right? It's just a complicated process. And in many times when I do an offer letter, I suggest people go and take chat with their lawyers or chat with an expert and so on about the offer to make sure everything's covered. But the case that you're talking about was termination without cause. So it was not a person that was behaving badly. They were just exited on performance, I believe. And when it went to the Court of Appeal, it was decided that the with cause clause in the offer letter was not well written. And for some reason that turned over the without clause cause. It's very complicated actually. But the thing is that employers do need to take a look at their offer letters every so often and make sure that they're up to date.
Okay.
And certainly with the clause that refers to terminating people with cause, that has to be very carefully written. So it's very rarely used though. People very rarely get terminated for cause.
Because it's a pain. Did I say that out loud? Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you in your thought process there.
No, it's just hard to say clause and cause a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I was really impressed.
So that is thing one, and that's the most important thing. And I know that doesn't sound very pandemic-y, but I'll come to that. The second thing is policies and procedures, that things are in place so that everybody knows what they're doing. So if you have an offer letter and you have the policies and procedures in place so that everybody knows what the ground rules are, then you're set to have a good employment relationship. And I would say that the third component is to have a really solid health and safety, hopefully team or health and safety policy, plans in place and so on. And that's why, we talk about Ontario being highly regulated, but health and safety is so critical because actually, if you have a tripping hazard or your machines aren't working properly, then your business isn't progressing. And that's what we all want. We want business to be progressing for the employee's sake and for the employer's sake. So health and safety is critically important. And really the pandemic falls under health and safety. And, it's so important actually that in Ontario, if you have 6 employees or more, you need to have a health and safety representative on staff, an employee that works with management. And then of course, the more people you have, the bigger your health and safety component is and the bigger your group or committee is. So that's, Justine, incredibly important, because if you have a pandemic and something horrible happened, then you've got something to swing into place and start working through what has to happen. And back in March, we all started scrambling to put together a pandemic plan. I'm sure your business did as well. How did that go for you?
Funny enough, we were all set up to immediately start working from home. We always have been. And that's one thing that we were really happy about and fortunate to have in place already. And that was just by virtue of the nature of our jobs. We just said, I want to be able, for myself, if a client needs to talk to me at 8 o'clock at night, I don't want to have to go into the office to access everything. So I want to have remote access. And we then said, well, it makes no difference if it's just me having the remote access or the entire team. So let's just give it to the entire team. And then that way, if they're sick or they need to check on something or whatever, or they want to work, from home because they didn't get everything done that day, they have the same flexibility that we all do. And it was actually, really, really awesome to have that. And so that was an easy transition for us. But we were considered an essential service, so we didn't have to close down the office, but obviously the health and safety committee, which we do have in place at our office.
Good.
Yeah, I know. I always kind of laughed about it. I remember when I first started, I was like, I have a paper cut. Now, am I supposed to get my own Band-Aid or do I have to? No, it was a bit of a joke. But yeah, and so no, we do have a health and safety committee. We make sure that their CPR and everything is up to date. And they said, let's try to keep it to the rules of just public health guidelines and so on. Anyway, even though technically we fall into this category over here where we could all be in the office if we wanted to. So we made sure that we just didn't have more than 3 people in the office at a time. And those 3 people had the option of working from the office. We were more than willing to have mail forwarded and phone calls forwarded. So things came together really well, and we did have people that wanted to be there. And so kind of, life kept going tickety-boo. And as each phase, luckily for us, like touch wood, we were very, very fortunate there. But as we continued to progress through the phases and so on, we would, as an office and a team, make decisions on what we were comfortable with. So we do have now like anybody can be in the office that wants to be in the office, but you still have the flexibility to work from home if that's what you're comfortable with. If you come to the office and you're in one of the common areas of the office, you must be wearing a mask. So, so we've implemented our own rules that way, but it has certainly been a bit fly by the seat of your pants, because obviously I don't think any of us have dealt through a pandemic before. But it was like, well, this seems to be a good decision and one that's going to keep everyone safe and confident and doable, and business will still keep going. So
yeah, I think that SARS was a bit of a wake-up call. I don't know if you remember what SARS was like and how strange a time that was, but it came and went kind of quickly. So, but I think it was a bit of a wake-up call for everybody, and that, not a good thing, but a helpful thing that it did come along and make us think a little bit about these sorts of things. The idea with health and safety too is not just tripping hazards. And I remember the big one was always, don't sniff whiteout if you work in an office environment. That was always the big joke. But there are tripping hazards in offices. There are machines that operate in businesses that are in manufacturing and all those kinds of areas. So these are hugely important things to keep in mind. And also under the health and safety umbrella, which is a totally different topic that we can talk about another day if you'd like, is anti-harassment. That is under health and safety, because if people aren't in a safe environment, either physically or emotionally, then they're not going to do the work that needs to be done, and they're going to be distracted, and management's going to be distracted, and again, the business gets held up from doing what it's supposed to be doing. But in terms of return to work, there's a couple of things there that, as you mentioned, wearing the masks, and I think at this point most employers are providing masks to employees, at least a couple, and then they can take it from there, what kind of mask they want to wear. They might be doing things like plexiglass in their offices, or we've all seen them in the grocery stores, lines on the floor, keeping that, what I always mistakenly say 6 meter distance, but it's 6 foot, 2 meter distance from other people. Just basically common sense physical distancing rules that I think we're all kind of used to now. The government in phase 3 has asked if we could work remotely, to continue working remotely. And part of that is to keep the amount of population down that's out and about, right? Because things have been ticking up a little bit, and this isn't even the second wave that's sort of hanging out there, and we don't know if it's going to happen or not going to happen. And of course, as Canadians, we all watch the American news and get a little bit caught up in what's happening down there. So, but if you can work remotely, this is still, the request is to work remotely. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is the return to work for any worker. So I'm not talking about layoffs, just return to work. And that is making sure that people know what has been done to protect them and protect the environment. So if it's important in a business to bring people back, then communicate frequently, of course, to see how they're doing and keep up with things and so on, and delegate work or talk about work and furthering the business, but also to talk about, here's what we've done as a business to protect you. Here's the extra cleaning we're doing. Here's what we've done about our HVAC system. Here's what we're doing related to clients and client meetings, and can clients come in or can we go out to clients? And here's what we've done in terms of protecting everybody that we can, because we're so interconnected, right? You don't just sort of go to work and see those 4 people. Those 4 people see 10 people or whatever their social group is. Exactly. So that's important to think about.
And employees have, places that they can go if they're not feeling safe, to request someone, an inspector actually, to come in to the workplace, right? So I think, I mean, it's critical as an employer to know that if there are complaints, it's not necessarily that you have to jump on them and do something about them if you don't think that they're reasonable. But certainly if an inspector comes through, you know, you have to ask yourself, is that inspector going to say this is safe or not safe?
Yep. Yeah, that's another way of looking at it. And certainly the Ministry of Labor has been inundated with complaints about work refusals. And that's basically what you're talking about there, is somebody saying, I refuse to return to work. And the inspector can be asked to come in. Of course, you would start with doing an investigation yourself in terms of understanding what the concern is and seeing if you can, you know, allay the fears of individuals, because we're all frightened. Everybody is scared of what's happening right now. But if you can say, here's what we've done, so that list that I went over in terms of everything from HVAC to client management, and say it's a safe environment and we do expect you to come into work. That's easily done by the sounds of it, but people are emotionally upset. And in this period of time, I think that we really need to err on the side of being as kind as possible to each other, and understanding that maybe people are fearful about returning to work, and doing everything we can to arrange that. But if there is a need for the ministry to come in, the ministry will come in. And I can tell you that in most of these complaints that have gone forward, they have not been proved.
Oh, interesting.
Businesses are taking care and trying to do their very best for people.
Interesting. I love your point about being kind, because you're right. A lot of people have very different reactions to this pandemic. And obviously we all have different risk tolerances. And
Yes.
I mean, it's been said a million times, but it's really the best way to say it is these are unprecedented times. We're all working our way through it in the best way that we can. And so there's a lot to be said for that factor. So what do you do with work refusals? Like as an employer, an employee doesn't want to come in, aside from getting the ministry in to say, I prove to you everything is safe. Are there other steps that you should be taking?
Yes. So a work refusal, and that's why we talk about being kind in these times, but a work refusal really does become a performance issue. It does become a situation where the employee does need to attend the office. And this actually could be either layoff or remote workers, because there's a lot of remote workers would prefer not to return to the office. And so either way, an employee can't arbitrarily decide themselves where they're going to work. If their employer needs them in the office or wants them in the office, that is their right to do that, and to explain how they've done everything possible. And if the employee continues to refuse, then we're in a different situation related to performance and trying to work through this as best as possible. But I mean, it can end up with a decision to go separate ways.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure. I know there's so much to it that's underlying it, because you have to make decisions that are right for your business, but also, like you say, recognize the times that we're in and try to adjust accordingly. Yeah. And I was going to ask a question. I'm just trying to think through it now. Oh, yes. I was wondering, I know you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what this is going to look like. But certainly there's a lot of parents wondering if their kids are going back to school, or if they're going to have some weird hybrid school situation, and they're all wondering what's going to happen to their jobs or their ability to work to the same degree. Any thoughts for employers on ways that they might want to be setting themselves up for the possibility of a hybrid school year, where some employees are saying, I can't, I got to be at home 3 days a week?
Yeah. And again, I would really encourage employers to be supportive to that, because we're talking about the next generation of workers, for one thing, so or clients or customers. So that's when we get into accommodation, and it is very important to consider accommodating and actually move into human rights at that point, because we are obligated from a human rights point of view to take care of people who need accommodation up to the point of undue hardship. And undue hardship is a line that's so high, Justine, that I can't even imagine an example right off my thought process of one that actually worked, where an employer said it would be undue hardship for me to accommodate this situation. So as far as that goes, things like disability, things like childcare, elder care, family care, there's all sorts of leaves of absence that are job protected that people can take a look at. But this is why through this process where we're all affected, it's so important to partner with employees and say, how can we work this out? Because we need you, they need you, what can we work out? And when it's a remote workforce, and it can be done remotely, then that's pretty straightforward. It's when it's people that have to be on site that it gets really complicated, really.
For sure. Well, let's hope we don't get there.
Yeah, or the second wave.
I know. I know. Okay. Do you have other thoughts or things you want to be sharing with us through the return to work, pandemic, employers? Let's think about.
I think that the other thing, the final thing that I wanted to chat about was people on layoff.
Yes.
And I have so much sympathy for people who are on layoff, Justine, because you are in limbo if you're on layoff. And I know that there's sort of this thought that if you're collecting CHRP and maybe making more money than from CHRP, the Emergency Response Fund, then you'd be working, so why not stay at home? There's very few people that feel that way. Most people want to work, they want to do their jobs, they want to contribute, and so on. So laying off individuals is a huge decision, and it's a tough decision for employers. But it's so important to remember that these people are still your employees. They're just in limbo at this point. So it's so critical to remain communicating with your employees who are laid off, asking them how they're doing, and so on. So there's sort of that side of it. But the other side of it is the return to work. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things on that. It's similar to what I mentioned about remote, that you have to go over everything that you've done, when you expect the person to report to work after layoff. And it's also really important to do all this in writing. It's a little bit more formal than maybe the remote worker. Because the remote worker, nothing has really changed, just their environment. So for a laid off person, they need to know all of those details, what we've done, when we expect you, when to arrive. And the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to say, please confirm that you've received this communication. Because there's nothing worse than trying to find someone or wondering why you haven't heard back, and then thinking, well, I guess they're gone. And then 3 months later, the employee shows up and says, I never got a letter. I'm not just sure what you're referring to. So it's important that the loop is closed. So I did want to mention that. Also, you might be aware that when somebody's laid off, they're laid off for 13 weeks, generally without benefits, but longer if they have benefits coverage. Is that something that you would be aware of or involved in at all?
Yeah, a lot of our employers, we've encouraged them to keep the benefits on their employees because of the possibility of there being like it turning into a dismissal, or termination that you would never want. And there's a lot of, it's unfortunate in these times, there's been a lot of lawyers who are seeing opportunity to represent employees. So employees have never been so well informed on their rights, which is great. You should be informed on your rights, not a bad thing. But you know, it's making employers very, very, very cautious on making sure that they dot all their T's and cross all their I's. Nope, they're gonna dot their I's and cross their T's. Coming back to
one thing,
causes, right? Yeah. So we've encouraged everyone to keep their benefits, but certainly, I believe it's 13 weeks, and then there's unless they keep their benefits, I believe you can extend it. And I'm trying to remember the time frame.
It's 35 and
35 or 33. 35.
Yeah, but right now, people that are laid off, and this is an important point, are considered to be on infectious disease leave,
Mhm.
infectious disease emergency leave.
Yeah.
That's what it's considered to be. And so the Ontario government has waived the termination clicking in at 13 weeks.
Yes.
That will last for 6 weeks after the emergency is lifted, which I think, maybe you know this, but I think it may even be tomorrow that is supposed to be the last day. They usually have extended, right? So the most recent extension was to July 29th. So,
Yeah.
and
I,
so that, then
I
that's 6 weeks grace. Sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that the infectious disease leave came out maybe sometime in mid-April or early May. And so when the pandemic initially hit and employers were going, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I'm going to do, and laying people off, it was like, just keep their benefits in place for right now. Don't touch anything. I think
Mhm.
they ended up maintaining them for most of them anyway, but that infectious disease leave certainly helped give
Yeah,
more choice, um,
yeah,
more choice for sure, a little bit more flexibility.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult times. There's no question about it. I think as an employer, especially as a small, well, any employer, it's always challenging times, especially to do work in Ontario, where we are probably one of the most highly regulated provinces. But I think that the bottom line really is, as long as we sort of work together with our employees and try and work out how we can go forward, because it is only to all of our benefits when our employer is doing well. So
So true.
that's sort of where I'd like to leave the discussion, unless you've got any questions you'd like to ask. Or...
I don't. I've been asking them the whole way through, but I just love talking about this with you, and I really appreciate your time. This has been awesome. Just as a reminder to everybody who tunes in, Jann has an awesome newsletter where all of this stuff gets covered, and very quick to read, but super informative. And if you want access to that, you can get onto her subscriber list by either reaching out to her or reaching out to one of us, and we'll include info with this post. Okay, thanks again, Jann, and
Thank
we'll
you,
talk to you
Justine.
soon.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, you too.